Illustrative Math, Algebra 2, Unit 7, Lesson 2 is called Study Types. All right, our goals today are I can describe the different purposes for each type of study design. Our three study designs are survey, observational study, or experimental study. Second goal, I can recognize the difference between a survey, observational study, or experimental study. And our third goal, I understand that my choice of the design for a study will impact what questions I can answer. So a little review here. An experimental study is a study that collects data by directly influencing something to determine how another thing is changed. An observational study collects data without influencing the subjects directly. And a survey is a set of questions given to people to seek their responses. All right, each one of these has a time and a place to be used, and sometimes one of them is better than the others. So that's what we're going to look into today. All right, our warm-up. For each question, determine whether it is a statistical question. If it is a statistical question, determine whether an experimental study, observational study, or survey would be best at providing data to answer the question. Explain your reasoning. All right, so the first question, do dogs eat only brand A of dog food? Do dogs who eat only brand A of dog food have more health problems than those who eat a variety of food brands? Okay, so the answer to that is this is a statistical question. So this can be done as an experimental study because you want to compare two groups to determine how a dog's diet impacts the health of a dog. Could also be done as a survey if you ask people about their dog's diet and ask them to fill out a medical history for their dog. Okay, so an experimental study would probably be best because this is a statistical question. So back to there, experimental study collects data by directly influencing something to determine how another thing is changed. All right, do people who sit for at least 8 hours per day have more health problems than those who sit for fewer than 8 hours per day? All right, this is again a statistical question. This would probably need to be done as a survey or an observational study because an experimental study would require a group that sits for more than 8 hours per day. This could create ethical issues because it might not be healthy for people to sit that long each day. An observational study could be used to combine sitting habits for people with reports from hospitals. Okay. So yeah, you're not going to want to do a experimental study with that. You're going to want to do a survey or an observational study. What brand of dog food has the most protein per serving? This is not a statistical question. You would just find the dog food that has the most protein. Do people who eat a low-fat diet feel healthier than those who eat a variety of foods? This is a statistical question. The question would need to include a survey to understand people's feelings. An experimental or observational study could be used to assign people to different diets or track the type of diet they already follow. But then you still have to account for how they feel, which really is going to have to be a survey. So if you did an observational study, it would be difficult. All right, study type matching. All right, surveys are sets of questions given people seek their responses. Observational studies collect data without influencing things directly, and experimental studies collect data by directly influencing something to determine how another thing is changed. Okay, that's what we talked about at the beginning. Take turns with your partner to determine whether a survey, observational study, or experimental study would be the best way to collect data to answer the question. For each study type that you match, explain to your partner why you think this is the best type of study. For each study that your partner matches, listen carefully to their explanation. If you disagree, discuss your thinking and work to reach an agreement. All right, so I'm not going to do this with a partner. I'm just going to kind of do it by myself here. All right, so the first question, do smokers get in more car accidents than non-smokers? All right, I think a survey would probably be the only way to do that. It would be unethical to ask people to smoke for an experimental study. Since most police reports would not include whether the drivers in the accident are smokers, a survey might be needed to collect information. All right, it would be hard to do an observational study. You would have, you could get data from your police records, but it's not going to give you enough information because it won't tell you if they smoke. What is the student's favorite type of sport at this school? Survey would probably be the only way possible there. The only way to collect data about a student's sport, and it's spelled wrong, sport preference, is to ask them directly. Okay, anything that's a preference, you're going to have to go survey most likely. Okay. Number 3, do people who chew gum while studying do better on tests when they chew gum while taking the test than when they don't chew gum while taking the test? Experimental study would be pretty easy on this one because you would have 2 groups. The experiment would be needed to assess the influence of a variable, such as chewing gum during the test, on the response, such as a test score. So you just, make 2 groups of gum chewers and take the gum away from one and keep the gum for the other one and take a look at the test scores and see what happens. How has the percentage of the world's wealth owned by the top 1% of individuals changed over the past 30 years? Obviously, observational study would be the easiest way to do that. Data could be found or estimated based on records, but neither survey nor experimental study could be designed to produce data that would answer the question of interest. So, yeah, you would just take a look at the top 1% of individuals' wealth and look at that over the last 300 years, see how it's changed. Do strawberry plants produce more fruit when growing in a greenhouse or outside? That would be an experimental study. You're going to have 2 groups. Experimental study would be needed to assess the effect of one variable, plants growing inside or outside, on another, which is the amount of fruit produced. Okay, so you could, have 2 sets of um, plants, one inside, one outside, and then see which one produces more fruit. Okay, you'd have to make sure you keep all your other variables the same, as far as like how much water they're getting and things like that. All right, what are the most important issues for voters in a district at the moment? That would be a survey. You're finding something about preference. A survey collecting the data without asking people about their preferences is not possible. So surveys needed to understand their preferences. All right. So what you're starting to see here is, as you look at these, for surveys, these are going to be anything with preference. Experimental studies are, kind of like cause and effect. Cause and effect. Um, observational studies are things that you can access information. Okay, anything that you can access the information without needing an experiment. All right. Study of 1,000 people aged 20 to 30 asked how much television each person watches each night and how each person would rate their energy levels in the evenings. The study showed that people who watch television for at least 2 hours every night have lower energy in the evening than people who do not watch as much television. Is this study a survey, observational study, or experimental study? Explain your reasoning. Oops. All right, this is a survey. People were asked to provide data about themselves rather than the researchers collecting information about the people independently or influencing the amount of television they watched each night directly. Okay, pretty much a survey. Does this mean that watching television for at least 2 hours every night lowers the energy in the evening? Explain your reasoning. Not necessarily, no. Since the data was collected through a survey, only an association can be determined and not a causal relationship. It's possible that some people may have lower energy in the evening for other reasons, and they watch a lot of television since they do not have energy for other activities. All right, so in order to determine causation in experimental study is much better than a survey. The survey will only be able to relate an association. If you were to do your own experiment to determine if watching television for at least 2 hours every night lowers energy in the evening, how would you set up the experiment? So what I put was I would find 100 people willing to participate in the study and divide them into 2 groups randomly. I would take an initial survey of their energy levels in the evening and the amount of television watched every night. I would ask one of the groups to watch television for less than 2 hours every night, and the other group to watch at least 2 hours of television every night. After 1 month, I would ask all participants to rate their energy level in the evening and compare the results of the data collected before the study. So you need pre-study information and then post-study information and see if anything changed. So that would be one way to do it. The more people, the more accurate. I just put 100 because it was kind of a, not a very small number, but obviously the more people would be better. All right, what type of study would you perform to test if one weightlifting routine results in better strength faster than another weightlifting routine? Explain your thinking. I would use an experimental study because that's easy. You can have 2 groups. You want to compare 2 different routines. The first variable to how fast strength builds, which is the second variable. You might also want to use a group that does not do any weightlifting as a control group. If you already had 2 groups using each routine, you could potentially do an observational study to see which group gains strength faster. What type of study would you conduct if you wanted to know how many hours high school students spend gaming on school nights? Explain your reasoning. I think I would do a survey and just ask them directly how much time they spend gaming on weeknights. Describe an example of an observational study. All right. I put an example of an observational study would be to investigate the percentage of people who come to a complete stop at stop signs. You could do this by standing at an intersection that has a stop sign and observe the number of cars that come to a complete stop. Okay. We're not trying to influence them. We're just recording data. Okay. Could the example given for the observational study be investigated with a survey? Explain your thinking. Could be, but you probably have to change the question to something more like the percentage of people who say they come to a complete stop at a stop sign. People might not be honest because they're, sometimes reluctant to admit that they're breaking the law. Could the example given for the observational study be investigated with an experimental study? Explain your thinking. I put an experimental study does not make sense because you can't compare how one variable relates to another variable in this scenario. Okay, we can't really determine what is causing them to stop or not stop at the stop sign. So that would be not something that we could use. All right, so back to our goals. I can describe the different purposes for each type of study design: survey, observational study, or experimental study. I can recognize the difference between a survey, observational study, or experimental study. I understand that my choice of the design for a study will impact what questions I can answer. All right, last thing here. A researcher discovers that the diameter of a person's pupil in their eye is directly related to how beautiful they find the image they are looking at. The researcher wants to know whether reading an article about climate change influences people's perception of pictures of a city in terms of beauty. 100 people have volunteered to be part of a study. The researcher's assistants proposed 3 options to run the study. All right, so match each of the options to the type of study. So survey, observational study, or experimental study. So for A, volunteers are split into 2 groups by a random process. One group will read the article and the other will not. Everyone will then look at the city pictures and the diameter of the pupil will be measured while they look at the pictures. Okay, so we're in 2 groups there. That's an experimental study. Cause and effect. 2, the volunteers look at the pictures of the city and rate how beautiful they find the pictures on a scale of 1 to 10. They then read the article and look at the pictures again, rating them on a same scale. That'd be a survey, right? You're just asking them how they view the pictures. C, the volunteers are shown into an art gallery with the pictures of the city on the wall and the article in a program given to the people when they enter. The researcher would keep track of who reads the program and measure the pupil size of people as they view the pictures. That would be an observational because you're just observing. And two, which option should the researcher use? Explain your reasoning. I put the experimental study because the question of interest is about the effect of one variable on the other. Okay, so we're trying to see if one thing affects another thing. So that would be an experimental study. All right, thank you for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time.